Welcome back to another episode of the Pittsburgh Sports Castle Podcast. I'm your host, Rachael Krieger. I'm joined today by Shalene Hixon, but today, before I bring Shalene on, I want to take a minute to recognize a very special member of the soccer community. Whether you are a fan of soccer or not, we all agree that cancer sucks. It really, really sucks. We've lost too many good people in this world to cancer. This past July, I lost my aunt to cancer. June or July. Honestly, this year has been so crazy. I can hardly remember which one, but I think it was July. In the soccer community, there is a podcast called Total Soccer Show. It's one of the best out there with Daryl Grove and his co-host and friend, Taylor Rockwell. They are two of just the best people in the world, to be totally honest with you. I haven't met them in person. I've talked to Daryl once. I've talked to Taylor twice. They are really, really just good people who are always willing to reach out to the little guys. Aside from this podcast, I do a couple other soccer specific podcasts with MLS and NWSL. And any time that I've needed advice or, have just asked for ways to help promote our show, Taylor and Daryl have always been just the utmost kind and respectable people in the world. They're always willing to share their knowledge. And most of all, they love the game of soccer, and it's beautiful to hear them speak about soccer just with such passion and exuberance as they do. And I believe it was Thursday night, Daryl Grove, at the age of 40, passed away after his battle with colon and liver cancer. Daryl's one of the best, and it breaks my heart. It was really tough news to hear. This morning, at time of recording, it's Friday night, so this morning we all got the news. Taylor shared on Total Soccer Show a little mini update. Daryl passed away with his wife, Shannon O'Neill, by his side, and his mom, Julia. So in the show notes, we have a link to the GoFundMe campaign that was raised to help with medical bills, funeral expenses, all of that jazz. If you can, please consider donating. Any little bit helps. And just from someone who listened to Total Soccer Show as a fan before I even got into doing podcasting myself, I cannot tell you how much that Daryl is going to be missed in this world. I said it once, I'll say it again. He is just the best of the best. There are not many humans like him. And I am just absolutely gutted for his wife, Shannon, and their entire family. Rest in peace, Daryl. We'll have a beer for you. And we will continue to honor your memory as we continue to grow the game of soccer in the United States. So if you can, please consider donating. But rest in peace, Daryl Grove, 40 years old, passed on October 23rd, 2020. So had to get the sad news out of the way first, folks, but just wanted to kind of pay my respects to Daryl and offer my condolences to everyone, to Taylor, his business partner, his friend, his fellow podcaster. So let's bring Shalene on.
Oh.
Shalene, sorry you had to go after all of the sad news there about Daryl, but we had a good laugh before the start of the show on the Pittsburgh Sports Castle podcast. One day we'll release all of the outtakes from the Pittsburgh Sports Castle podcast, and it will just be like 10 hours of pure chaos. So how are you, my friend?
A lot better after that. That should have been the intro to the show, honestly. I think everyone would have gotten a good laugh out of it, but I'm doing good. I can't complain. Actually, I wish it was a little cooler today instead of it being 80 degrees in October. But
oh, don't worry, it'll drop to 50 tomorrow.
Oh, I'm okay with that. That's my weather. But yeah, other than that, I can't complain. Added to my tattoo collection yesterday, so
very nice.
Yes.
Even though she supposedly hates needles, viewers, but it's different, right, Shalene?
It is different. Everybody who has tattoos can tell you they're different than medical needles. At least I think they are. I can at least handle them, so it is different, Rachel. It sounds so cliched, but it really is different.
Oh, Shalene, what am I gonna do with you?
Can't get rid of me now. It's been how many years? Been
We just know too much about each other.
I was gonna say because we've been friends since I think when I was a sophomore in college, possibly. So that was 5 years
Like
at
5 years. It's been 5 years, yeah. That's how long I've been stuck with her, viewers, and how long she's had to listen to me rant about soccer.
Mm-hmm.
And Shalene,
yes,
I have a Riverhounds rant.
I'm just gonna sit back and let you go at it. I'll just sit there and nod my head and go, mm-hmm, yeah, okay.
Like everyone else on the Pittsburgh Sports Castle podcast, I got you. Riverhounds fans, don't worry. This is not hailstorm, thunder, earthquake type of rant. It's just I understand that the Riverhounds lost their first round playoff contest against Louisville City FC, their big, bad, fierce rival, the mountain that somehow the Riverhounds just cannot seem to get over. A couple weeks ago, we had Ryan James on the podcast. He acknowledged that, Louisville has always been tough for them. It's been a long season. It is a completely different team from the Riverhounds team that beat them, I think, 3 or 4-1 in the beginning of the season. And I understand that Pittsburgh doesn't have like a New York Yankees type of income. They're not the sexiest city to come and play soccer in. I get that. I understand that. And Bob Lilly has done an excellent job finding players that he is pulling either just out of college or finding former guys from the Rochester Rhinos that he's bringing to the Riverhounds and trying to recreate that team. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. I mean, Lily's here in Pittsburgh now. That's, there's no ifs, ands, buts about that. And he does a great job just finding and scouting talent. I always say that if U.S. Soccer could ever hire Bob Lilly as in like a good role, they should get him as a technical director because he is such a good scouter. But when it comes to these playoff games, I don't know if it's the inexperience from some of these younger players. I don't know if it's something else. It could just be that, this year they just happened to happen against Louisville again, and COVID and everything has just got too much. I don't know. This year it's hard to kind of fault athletes and teams for maybe, I don't want to say falling apart at the end, but I guess I am going to say falling apart at the end because COVID's still happening. A pandemic is still real. And it's incredibly understandable if some of these guys, especially in a sport like soccer, where you're playing, 5 games in 20 days, like it is 100% understandable if you are not 100% on the pitch. I get that. I totally understand. But there is something that it's just something with the first round of the playoffs. It's something with Louisville. They just can't get over that hump. I don't know what else they need to do because, a lot of people are saying, well, maybe it's Bob Lilly. I don't think it's Bob Lilly. I really don't think it's Bob Lilly. I don't think I just think that Louisville intimidates the team. I think there's something about Louisville that just gets Pittsburgh shaking in their boots, and they just can't find a way to beat them. Cameron Lancaster scored in the 17th minute. He's a really, really, really good goal scorer. And he's one of the best. He's always usually on the top of the USL charts every single year. But Corbin Bone scored in the 86th minute. And before that, Pittsburgh was getting all different types of momentum going their way. And then one good break from Louisville, Jason Johnson feeds the ball to Corbin Bone, and it's pretty much game over. I mean, I don't know what happened at the end. Were they tired? they could have been. I mean, it was a long game. The mountain is visible, and Pittsburgh definitely needs to find a way to fix it. They need to figure out a way to beat Louisville in games that matter. I'm not saying the regular season doesn't matter because you need wins to build points. Absolutely. But they need to win in games that really, really matter. And that's these playoff games. Every year they're so close, but they're so far. And it's been that same story for the past 2-3 years now. Granted, it's great that the team makes the playoffs. You expect that now with Bob Lilly. With Bob Lilly usually comes success. But at the same time, these are a lot of players who have won championships under him in Rochester. Is it the exact same team? No. But I feel like with the balance that the Pittsburgh Riverhounds have with veteran, kind of third, second year players, and then a ton of rookies, they should be able to climb that mountain. I'm not a professional soccer player. I can't give you the insight on what it's like to play against Louisville. But there's definitely something that needs to change for Pittsburgh. I don't know what it is. It's going to be a long off season. The playoffs are still happening. We'll definitely keep you updated on who wins the title, especially if it's Louisville. I guess we'll have to acknowledge them. But it's going to be a long off season. I'm intrigued to see who stays and who goes. If Bob Lilly can get a team to the playoffs that lost the likes of Kevin Kerr, Toby Adewale, and Joe Greenspan, 3 huge players for the team. And Nico Brett too. I always forget about Nico Brett. If a team can rebuild after losing that much talent, I think the Riverhounds will be okay. They just really need to figure out a way. They need to figure out why Louisville is their kryptonite. So that's my Riverhounds rant. Let's move on from soccer. Shalene, I have talked way too much so far. Talk to me about the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is the second time in team history they've started the season off 5-0, and tell me why that's important.
It's very important because the only time they've done it was back in 1978, and Steelers fans should recognize that year very well because we ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. And thanks to my dad, I learned that they ended up going 7-0. So I'm like, that's why Dad's very helpful when it comes to the old school like Steelers stuff and whatever. So they went 7-0. They ended up winning the Super Bowl. So history has a good way of repeating itself. So we'll see. I think the next 3 weeks are going to be rather interesting, especially this week too, going in against Tennessee. But breaking down the Steelers' performance so far this year, I feel like it's very surprising because it feels like a lot of the national media did not expect this kind of start from us. I think I saw so many so many media people saying that, oh, well, Ben just came back from major elbow surgery. He's not going to be as good as he used to be. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do that. How can they recover? Oh, well, at least their defense is good. There's that. But they ended up, I think most of them ended up ranking us maybe like second in the East, obviously behind Baltimore. Heck, I even saw somebody put us in third behind the Bengals, I'm like, there's no way. I think it was actually Cleveland, but either way, that's bad enough. So to see them go out to a 5-0 start already and play as well as they have, it's very nice to see because after last year, we needed to see some good football again, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And speaking of the offense, Rachael's new favorite player on the Steelers, Chase Claypool, continues to impress people after his breakout performance 2 weeks ago against the Eagles. He did it once again against the Browns. But Rachael, I'm going to flip the script on you. I'm used to getting asked the questions. How do you think he's going to do now that the teams are going to be prepared for him, because they even talked about it last week, about how he's not the best kept secret anymore for the Steelers. So now that the teams know he's there, know he's actually capable of doing things, how do you think he's going to handle it going forward?
I think there's two parts to that question. I think that you have a real opportunity for Deontay Johnson then to step up, or someone like James Washington, who, Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool are big guys. Like, they're both like 6'4", 6'5", respectively. And so they're targets. And yeah, you're right. Chase Claypool definitely is not the best kept secret in the NFL anymore. But that just means that some of these other guys that have been behind the scenes could have a real opportunity to, as we say in basketball, crash the boards. They have a real opportunity to really just show off their skills, because, all eyes are going to be now on Juju, and all eyes are going to be on Chase Claypool. Honestly, with all of these eyes on Chase Claypool, that leaves Juju Smith-Schuster pretty much open as well, because I think a lot of people still really undermine him, especially after the year he had last year. He's put up good numbers this year. He's put up decent numbers. They're not, they're not Chase Claypool's numbers, but I mean, he was the best kept secret for like 5-6 weeks here. But the other part to the question, because I mentioned the Deontay Johnson thing, is also, I just think that Chase Claypool is such an athlete that he can outrun and outstrength isn't a word, but still outstrength. Like, he can, if like somebody's coming at him, he's gonna, it's gonna be like swatting a fly almost. I think that he's just such a natural athlete, and he's gifted in a lot of other things. Football wasn't just his bread and butter when he was up in Canada. So he is gifted at a lot of different things. So I think just the natural athlete, like, whereas when I look at Juju, I see a football player. Mm-hmm. But with Chase Claypool, I see, like, and this is no disrespect to Juju, but I see a legitimate athlete in Chase Claypool. So I think that he just has the power to just outperform some of these defensive backs, get open, and figure out a way to catch the ball. I hope that answers your question.
It did, Rachel. How's it feel? How's it feel to have the table?
Yeah. Well, I mean, on another podcast I literally get asked questions the whole time, but this one definitely threw me a wrench in the plans. But Deontay Johnson, full participant in practice this week.
Yes.
I kind of just mentioned this, but how does this affect the wide receiver core? I am back to asking you.
Oh, the tables have turned again. I think it's going to be more of an asset than it is a detriment, because obviously last week you had Claypool and Juju and Washington, and really Washington and Claypool were getting more of the catches, more of the targets than Juju was. Granted, he still had a couple, but you obviously saw more of the big plays coming from Washington and Claypool. Now adding Johnson back into the lineup means they're going to be able to swap these guys out left and right. And if he was doing as good as he was before he got hurt, they're going to attack him from all different sides of the field with all these different receivers. So I think it's definitely going to help them, and they're definitely going to need it, because we're not playing a I'm not going to say, well, Cleveland was kind of average, but other than that, for the most part, below average teams. So this is going to be our first real test in Tennessee this weekend. But I think it'll definitely help them. It'll give them another target. And again, he was doing really well before he got hurt. So hopefully he'll be able to do that again, if and most likely when he comes back into the lineup this weekend.
Good stuff. So I don't know how much there's to talk about with this, because I feel like, in no disrespect to fullbacks in the I almost said the NWSL, the NFL, I'm still in detox mode from the fall series. But the NFL, Derek Watt, he got hurt in the game against the Texans. He is ruled out again this week. Hopefully he'll be able to return soon. Fullbacks are usually like an extra offensive lineman in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I think that segues it really well into your other point. You've got two players that you call out specifically. They kept Myles Garrett in check last week. Who are they? What do you need to see them do this week specifically against Jadeveon Clowney?
So anybody who's visited the site, I think it was a few weeks ago. I feel like I always lose track of time. I wrote an article about Chuck Okorafor and how well he was doing, getting kind of just thrust into this position as a lineman. And Kevin Dotson had to do the same thing last week with, was it DeCastro? Yeah, I think it was DeCastro. Having a moment there, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it was DeCastro. Yeah, he was out. So Dotson had to come in and kind of just, again, in like an emergency situation and kind of take over. And they both have been doing really well every time they've had to step up to the occasion. And it really started, especially with the Okorafor, like I mentioned in my article, it really started against the Texans when he didn't allow J.J. Watt, of all people, to sack Ben. And you look at that matchup on paper, it's a total mismatch. You have like a former defensive player of the year, sacks leader, Pro Bowler, every defensive accolade in the book, Watts at least won it once. And then Okorafor, who had I think like maybe 3 or 4 starts on the line at tackle. So for Okorafor to do as well as he did said a lot. And Tomlin, I remember before the season started, he said it was such a close race between him and Banner that if a situation like what happened, he wasn't going to hesitate putting Okorafor in. Then you need Dotson coming in to replace DeCastro, and he basically did the same thing. Like you had mentioned, they both, and the entire line, kept Myles Garrett in check last week. 2 weeks ago, they kept Fletcher Cox in check. This week, they're going to have to do the same against Jadeveon Clowney. Plain and simple. There's always going to be one back that you got to watch out for on the opposing team, and it's definitely going to be a Jadeveon Clowney this week. So really, I feel like the O-line doesn't really need to do anything different because whatever they've been doing, it's been working because they're giving Ben, more often than not, plenty of time to get his throws, do something. They're just giving him the time, which is more than what some teams can say, because I remember watching the Giants and Eagles game on Thursday, and it seemed like the Eagles O-line could not give Carson Wentz more than like 2 seconds to do anything. So to see the Steelers giving Ben his O-line, giving him that much time to make the plays he needs to make is very impressive, and I really hope they can keep doing it going forward.
I think the offensive line is always a position of unsung heroes.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the defensive line gets a ton of credit for getting a sack on quarterbacks for sure. But when the O line does something really well, it's just like, I mean, there's so much spotlight on quarterbacks that I think it just, gets ignored. But that's the offense for us. Yeah, I'm excited to see how teams are going to try to keyword try here, contain Chase Claypool, because I don't think it's going to be easy at all. And I've been really impressed so far with the O-line. And I just want Deontay Johnson to come back for a game and stay healthy for a game.
Please.
So fingers crossed, prayer circle, get some sage. Steeler Nation, we need to buy a boatload of sage. So defense, you have a lengthy graphic. We will post it in the show notes.
Yes.
But why don't you read us some of the key parts of this graphic? And I know that's probably hard because I know you just want to read all of it. But
yes, I do. But so when was this posted? 3 days ago, the Steelers posted a graphic that shows how their defense ranks in the NFL. And I'm going to try to condense this as much as I can, so listeners, bear with me. The Steelers' defense is ranked first in net pass yards allowed, quarterback hurries, quarterback pressures, quarterback sacks, sacks per game, tackles for loss per game, and total yards allowed. They're second in the league in interceptions, quarterback hits, rushing yards allowed per game, and total yards allowed per game. And they are third in fused completions allowed, scoring defense, total yards allowed per play, and yards lost by sack. There are a couple more in each of the categories, but to have a defense that is in the top 3 in basically every statistical category that you can have for a defense shows you how good they really are. Granted, they've been playing against some lousy teams, but they still continue time and time again to just show how good they really are. And it's not like how it used to be where, oh, well, we're supposed to run these kind of teams over on offense and they do the complete opposite. Steelers fans kind of have had that happen, like seen that happen before, where we play down to our competition. This defense, there's no playing down to any competition when it comes to them. They are dominant and they are impressive. And I hope they can keep it up, especially against good teams like we're going to be seeing in the next 2 weeks in the Texans and the Ravens. These are going to be some really good games. I think a lot of people were expecting it to be a really good game between the Browns and us. And I mean, as a Steelers fan, I thought it was a really good game. Not a close game, but it was a good game. It was just, I think a lot of people were expecting it to be closer than it was. So I'm waiting to see how just the team as a whole, but especially the defense, rises to a challenge where they actually have some competition on the opposite side of the field. So I think Sunday is going to be their first big test, and I'm interested to see how they respond to it.
Despite all the COVID distractions, yeah, Tennessee's definitely a really good team, and that'll be a big test for them, but we'll get to that later. Band knees, Shalene, what does this mean? We are getting a movement going. This is something that, like, I've never seen this many ACL injuries in the NFL at one time. It is a very common injury in soccer, and I've seen, like, literally have been in a stadium live and watched a player tear their ACL. Horrific. Devin Bush tore his ACL. He's moved to the injured reserve. Defensive end Henry Mondeau was activated from the practice squad, and linebacker Ray Wilborn was signed to the practice squad. So, I mean, this is pretty big. You don't want this to happen. It's very upsetting that it happened. Devin Bush just seems like he always seems like the nicest guy off of the field. So you never want to see this, but for it to happen to him is really just it sucks. On the depth chart, Marcus Allen and Ulysses Gilbert III are listed as the second linebacker. So obviously there's going to be some competition there. I'm sure Mike Tomlin has openly stated that there will be competition. How much does this injury hurt the Steelers, and do you think it really is going to affect all of those stats that you just read on that graphic?
Well, you can't lie and say that it's not going to affect them in some capacity, because it was very easy ever since we drafted Bush to compare him to Shazier. That's why they drafted him. He was very Shazier-esque in he was strong but was speedy, and they always talked about needing that linebacker that could go sideline to sideline, especially to stop the run. So to have him go down is going to be a problem. But like you said, we have backups, and then I think Tomlin actually said Robert Spillane, I think that's how you say it, he came in to replace Bush when he got hurt against Cleveland, and he had, I think, 6 tackles, and 5 of them were solo. So he did pretty good. But granted, he wasn't in there the whole game, so it's going to be interesting to see if Spillane can handle the pressure and handle the workload that Bush had, especially going up against a, quite honestly, an NFL MVP candidate in Derrick Henry. So they're definitely going to need all the help they can get, but Tomlin always says it's the next man up mentality. So whether it's Gilbert or Spillane or whoever, he's going to expect them to go in, and you're obviously not going to fill Bush's shoes, but you're going to need someone to at least keep the defense going the way it is. I don't think overall it's going to absolutely tank their stats that I just read off of. They're still going to be dominant. It's just, I think, if anything, possibly the rushing stats might slip a little bit, unless Spillane literally just turns into Devin Bush 2.0 this year, which that remains to be seen. But yeah, we're definitely going to miss him on the backs, and it's gonna be tough, but hopefully we'll be able to just keep moving forward.
Injuries are coming hot and fast for the Steelers. Not probably the greatest thing. I definitely have to wonder out loud if it is just because of COVID, in the sense of it's really altered things from a training and fitness standpoint.
Yeah.
So that's definitely curious. But what else about the Steelers defense? Are you worried about anything, or is there anything that you really want to highlight? I mean, the defensive line has been really good this year. You touched on that a little bit. But what do you need to see from this defense moving forward? Because no matter how good they are, there is always something that could be improved on.
Yes, and I think every Steelers fan will agree with me on here that up until last weekend against Cleveland, our secondary was not the best. It wasn't god-awful, but it wasn't good either, and it was just you can't continuously rely on the linebackers and the defensive line to keep pressuring the quarterback, because that was what the problem was. If they weren't getting to the quarterback and the quarterback had time to make the plays, they were kind of shredding our secondary up. And finally, they just decided they wanted to play football last week against Cleveland, because I think it was what was it, Baker Mayfield? It was the first drive for Cleveland. First few plays of their first drive of the game, Minka Fitzpatrick finally shows up with a pick six. We hadn't heard his name in a very long time this season. Every time you heard Joe Hayden's name, for the most part, he was getting called for sometimes ticky-tacky, sometimes deserved penalties. Really, the only secondary guy that I honestly remember hearing in a good sense was obviously Steven Nelson a few weeks ago against the Eagles, but also Mike Hilton. Mike Hilton was easily their most consistent secondary the whole season, but then the problem is they just ruled him out against the Titans with a shoulder injury. So now you just lost possibly one of your best secondaries to the with the shoulder injury, which I didn't even know he was hurt. And so I just saw that today when we were doing research for the podcast. So that's I think a big blow to the secondary, but they finally showed signs of what it was last year against Cleveland. Granted, Cleveland was not helping their cause out at all. They just basically imploded from the inside out, but they're going to go a complete 180 this time, because now you got the Titans offense going. You're going up against them, and I really don't think they're going to make as many mistakes as Cleveland did, because let's be real, it's Cleveland. That's nothing new. We're used to this kind of mistakes, but the Titans, I don't know. I think if there was any time for the secondary to finally wake up this season, it would have to have been before the Titans game, because that's, again, their first real test. So it's going to be interesting to see how they respond to it, but I can't help but wonder how it's going to be with Hilton out of the picture.
Yeah, I mean, I something that I always point out in regard to any sport that I cover is not just people on the field, but off the field as well. Because I feel like Mike Hilton is your team player. Like, he is your guy that, he's your rah-rah guy in the huddle, but he's also leading by example. And so I think that, having him on the sideline, he's still there to guide the team. He's there to, shout out plays. He's going to do the rah-rah speech in the huddle. But I think that not having him on the field, like, I mean, people definitely take note of him on the field for sure. And I think that just losing him on as a like on the field player definitely is going to hurt. But yeah, I mean, the defense has been really good this year, and it's what kept the team in games last year, right? I mean, everybody expected the defense to come back and be good. I just don't think they expected them to come back and be good and also have a good offense this year because of all the uncertainty.
Yeah.
An area on the field that hasn't been great is the punting situation.
Yes.
Today, Dustin Colquitt. We keep saying today, by the way, time of recording is Friday. You are probably listening to this on Saturday. Steelers football eve, as we should say. But so Dustin Colquitt, he was with the championship winning Kansas City Chiefs for 15 years, and he hasn't made a full season with the Steelers. I will say, though, one thing. I don't know if you saw this, Shalene, but Charlie Batch on Twitter posted a video of Dustin Colquitt. Cam Kennedy absolutely botched the snap on a it looked like it was an extra point attempt from Chris Boswell, and Dustin Colquitt was able to grab it and literally put it in place perfectly, like nothing went wrong. And Charlie Batch said something along the lines of, I don't have it pulled up, so I'm paraphrasing. They're not going to show this on the highlight reel. They're not going to cover this, but this is really good. And credit to Colquitt for doing that. But Mike Tomlin said in the press release, I acknowledge that our punting is not up to snuff and that we have to get better in that area, and we are willing to do whatever is required in an effort to do so. So there's a lot happening here because the team is evidently bringing back Jordan Berry, but he is not eligible to play against the Titans because of a quarantine period that he needs to go through, which evidently is 7 days instead of the 14, but that's a rant for another different topic. But so no Jordan Berry this week. So I said to Shalene before we started recording, what the heck, is Chris Boswell taking punts? Evidently not. They are likely they haven't done it yet, but they will likely activate Corliss Waitman from the practice squad to be the punter on Sunday, or else have fun, Chris Boswell. Any comments on the kicking situation here, Shalene?
Yeah, normally I don't pay too much attention to the punting quality during games. Obviously, if I see that it's a bad punt, I will be like, yeah, that was a bad punt. So I did a little research as you were talking, and apparently Colquitt statistically was the 4th worst punter in the entire league, only behind punters from Dallas, New Orleans, and Atlanta. He was averaging, actually, I think if we're going by just average yards on a punt, he was tied for 3rd worst. He was averaging 43 yards a punt. That is not good. That is not good at all. And if I remember hearing correctly, that was actually so far this was his worst year statistically since his rookie year. So not very good. It's going to be extremely interesting to see what Waitman's going to be able to do. Hopefully he'll just be able to, or at least the Steelers will be able to grin and bear it until we get Jordan Berry back. Granted, Berry did not have the best season last year either, but who knows? Maybe Waitman comes in and absolutely blows Tomlin away, and he ends up being the punter instead of Berry. You never know, because you might always have that like little breakout moment. But yeah, apparently, according to Tomlin, a change needed to be made. So hopefully that won't come back to bite us on Sunday, but we'll see if Waitman is up to the task.
I think it's one of those things that I'm excited to see what Waitman does in terms of, will there be a punting competition, or are the Steelers just going to go with what they know with Jordan Berry? Give Waitman a what's it called? A fake punt. What the heck? At this point, let's just shout out to my friend Matt Pollard from Last Word Soccer Club Radio. Let's just have total chaos run through.
Right, just let it happen.
Yeah, at this point it's 2020, whatever. Speaking of chaos, The Tennessee Titans. This game was supposed to be played in week 4, but it was moved because of, as Shalene put it so eloquently in our show notes, the Titans COVID debacle. I think that is a great way to say that. They are both 5-0, and Derrick Henry. I'm gonna save my spiel for a minute, but you tell me, Shalene, why Derrick Henry is so freaking good at football.
Well, he currently leads the league in rushing yards with 588, and he is averaging, and I feel like I misprinted that on the notes. That wouldn't be points. He's averaging 117.6 yards a game. I feel like points would be a little odd. Yeah, we'll go with that. But he's very good. And this, I think, was the matchup I think a lot of people have been waiting to see, was Derrick Henry going up against the Steelers' rushing defense. I think it would have been more of a deadlock with Bush being in the lineup, but now with Bush being out, I don't know how that's going to affect our defense against the rush. I said earlier it might slip a little bit, but if we're able to contain for the most part, because I feel like Henry's the kind of one that you can't fully contain him, you can just kind of contain him a little bit, but if he doesn't go completely wild on us, the fact that our defense could potentially hold an MVP candidate and beat his team, I think is going to, for sure, legitimize how good this defense really is. And if they can do that, I think the rest of the teams better watch out, because it's going to be a nightmare playing against our defense, especially if they can stop a guy like Henry.
You know why I'm angry, Shalene?
I do know why you're angry.
Because it's always about quarterbacks. I get it, people.
It
MVP, the quarterback is the sexy position of the National Football League. I get it. It's great, you know. Everyone wants to hate Tom Brady, but then vote for him for MVP. Russell Wilson, very deserving of an MVP run this season. There needs to be more emphasis on other players too. And hello, ding, 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 defensive players can win MVP too. Hello. Derrick Henry, there was a graphic from, either ESPN or Bleacher or somebody, and it was like, hey, who's in the running for MVP? And it was all quarterbacks. It was all quarterbacks. Derrick Henry is crushing it this season. There has not been a running back, a non-quarterback MVP since Adrian Peterson in 2012. That's eons ago. That's almost a decade ago.
And then the scary thing about that is that even after Peterson, another non-quarterback, they hadn't won it since 2006 when LaDainian Tomlinson did it. So it always seems like it's occasionally a running back, and then it's a quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me that there's so much emphasis on quarterbacks. And really, I mean, if you're talking about people who are scoring points, if that's what you want to base it on, then go the fantasy football route. And don't just give it to a defensive player. Give it to a whole defense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't like, when it comes to awards and voting in sports, all across the board, it's always very skewed, especially when you get a fan vote involved, and then you get other people around the league. I need to know who all of these defensive players are voting for in the league, because I guarantee you they're looking out for one another too. They're not just like, oh, well, he threw two touchdowns against my team, I'm going to vote for him. Like, no, I mean, there needs to, I understand the quarterback is the position in football. I get it. I 100% get it. But like, they're not the only one scoring points. Most of the time, shoot, Ben Roethlisberger can throw a dink and dunk to Chase Claypool, and he can run 85 yards. And you know who's doing all the work, Shalene? Chase Claypool. You know who's getting credit for an 85-yard pass? Ben Roethlisberger. So you know what? That's my rant. I'm done speaking. Tell me your prediction for the Titans-Steelers game.
Well, I don't think I really had a prediction last week. I think I kept saying it was going to be a close game, and my God, was I wrong. But I don't think it's going to be that. I don't think it's going to be that case this week. It's going to legitimately be a close game. I've said I think the NFL is mad that they couldn't change this to the Sunday Night Football game because I feel like this would be the match that everybody would want to see. But since I actually do have to make a prediction this time, I think it's going to be very close. I'm going to say Steelers over the Titans 27-24. It's just basically going to come down to who makes the least amount of mistakes. That's easily going to be it. Who shoots themselves in the foot more is going to lose the game.
I think it's going to be a scoring fest. I think it's going... I don't have a final score prediction. I think that the Steelers are going to narrowly win it by a field goal. Mm-hmm. If I had to pick a final score, 38-35. But even still, I would not sleep on either of these teams putting up 40 points against either of these teams. So, yeah, fantasy football players, that's what I think. But please do not ever listen to me and take me 100% seriously. Only take me like 30% seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be a great game. Steelers, Titans, 1:00.
Yep. I
believe on CBS. Looking at the Steelers schedule, just, sometimes we miss podcasts. Sometimes, things are a little crazy. Tennessee Titans this weekend, 1:00, CBS. Week 8, Sunday, November 1st. Oh my God, people were already in November coming up. CBS again, 1:00. And then week 9 is going to be Sunday, November 8th, 4:25 on CBS against the Dallas Cowboys. Quick shout out, Dak Prescott. Hope you get better soon. Never want to see an injury like that to anybody. Just a class act guy. I hope you feel better. But also I recognize Shalene's boo for the Cowboys.
And the Ravens.
Shalene. And just anyone who's not the Steelers, right?
Yeah. Basically.
Shalene, tell us where people can find you on Twitter and give me some final thoughts on anything that has to do with football or your life.
I don't think we should get into the life thing because that could be a whole podcast in itself. But you can find me on Twitter at Shalene Hixon 21. And final thoughts for football. I honestly do think that the Steelers have a potential to make it to 8-0 to start the season. I think they can do it as long as they don't shoot themselves in the foot. They don't, as Tom always says, make self-inflicted mistakes. I think we can take down the Titans. I think we can take the Ravens down. But as my dad always says, when it comes to AFC North teams, throw the stats and the records out the window. It's always a free-for-all within the division. And then the Cowboys, we should take them down too. So I would not be surprised if we start 8-0, but I also would not be surprised if at some point in the next 3 weeks we finally get handed a loss. But once we do lose, if we do, because you never know with the NFL, it's going to be interesting to see how we respond the game after, because obviously they've been so used to winning this whole season. How are they going to respond if they potentially lose? How are they going to respond come the next game? Are they going to crumble, or are they going to absolutely demolish the next team they face? I'd like to think it's more of the latter kind of situation, because I feel like the team isn't as, how do I want to word it, mentally fragile as they've been in the past. I think they'll be able to handle a loss well, and hopefully this is the year, Rachel. This is finally the year that we've been waiting for a little while.
We forgot to mention, I need a full, at least 30-second reaction. Antonio Brown to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Shalene, you weren't going to get out of this without mentioning it.
I wish you would have, but...
too bad.
I honestly am kind of surprised in a way that it was the Buccaneers and not the Seahawks, because the wide receiving core for the Buccaneers is already pretty good, so I'm not entirely sure why they had to bring him in. Probably Brady wanted him, I'm sure, but, you know, you think these teams would learn, Rachael. You think they'd learn, but unless all of a sudden he's just become a completely different person, which I highly doubt because it's Antonio Brown. Once he starts not getting the catches he wants, we just might see the Buccaneers just implode from the inside out. And will I be sad about it? No, not really. Because any team that wants to sign him after all the stuff that he pulled, they get what they deserve.
I think that the New Orleans Saints are sitting there, rubbing their palms together, saying, Fine. We got him. We got him. Yeah, so on the Twitter machine, as my friend Matt says it that way, at Rachael Kruger, shout out to Cody's at Let's Talk Pitt. He does great stuff over there. He shares a lot of our stuff. I want to give a special shout out and recognition to Antonio Wolf, who has been working his butt off this week. He is going to be doing, if you haven't checked out the Wolf's Den yet, I told him this, Shalene. I said, Antonio, I stayed up all Sunday night wondering what a good pun for your last name would be. Didn't even think about the Wolf's Den. Antonio hit it out of the park with that title. Yeah. So if you haven't checked out the Wolf's Den, please do. He is going to be doing these Monday through Thursday, and they are just daily thoughts from when Antonio gets his morning cup of coffee. And they're all about Pittsburgh sports. He does a great job writing them. They're always very concise. And I know there's only been 4 of them, but he has been doing a wonderful job with them. So I thank him tremendously. And he tells you to support your local small business. So to give them a shout out, Allegheny Coffee and Tea Exchange, that is where Antonio gets his morning cup of coffee and then writes his article. So I might have to stop there. Shalene, when you're back in town, we're definitely going to have to go. Maybe we'll run into Antonio and chat about the Wolf's Den. But final words for me, just once again, if you can, I know these times are difficult, but if you can, please consider donating to Daryl's GoFundMe page. Any little bit helps the family. Rest in peace, my friend. You will be missed entirely. And then also just, I want to give a shout out to all of the youth teams in Western Pennsylvania, around the country, who are doing their best to stay safe. I'm coaching youth soccer right now. We just started up our basketball season. You don't see me right now, but I look like a giant orange highlighter because I'm still in my practice clothes. To those who are, volunteering their time as coaches, to those students who are excited to be back. And it gives us as much joy as it gives them. It's a little bit of normalcy. I can't tell you, listen, I'm coaching basketball Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then soccer Tuesday, Thursday. I have games Saturday and Sunday. I'm literally coaching 7 days this week, but I'm really happy about it because I really love being around the kids. It gives me something to look forward to. Even though all of my 7th and 8th graders, except for 2, are taller than me. So that's just a little bit about my height. Folks, we are on all major platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to check us out by searching our name. We're also on Google Podcasts, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, and of course Spreaker, where we record our shows. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Pittsburgh Sports Castle Podcast. Your feedback is very important to us, and any reviews posted will help make the podcast more visible to listeners. We are on Twitter at PGH Sports Castle. Listeners, if you have any ideas for podcast prompts and topics, please feel free to reach out to members of our team and our Pittsburgh Sports Castle Podcast Twitter to send some ideas along. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully I'll be able to speak words the next time you join us. And we will see you next time, hopefully with the Steelers as 6-0. Thanks for joining us. Godspeed, Daryl. You will be missed.